Remember, if you endorse capitalism over socialism, then you don't understand socialism. Or you're a horrible bastard who enjoys the suffering of others. Basically, if you earned a pay packet this last month, you should be fucking ashamed of yourself. It seems to me, however, the people that really don't understand socialism are the socialists, or maybe they don't understand humanity. The other rhetoric that'll be pumped your way is that you have socialism and communism confused. I don't have anything confused. One leads to the other every damn time. This is a common tripe amongst people who are aware of its devastation in the past, yet still think somehow they'd be the ones to get it right. It's quite egotistical, by the way, and statistically incredibly unlikely that you're right about that. The two become entangled, and that is a huge part of my problem with socialism. It might be somewhat an idyllic economy ideology that makes you look very virtuous indeed compared to evil capitalists, but it is extremely fragile and takes only a little corruption to turn the whole thing into fucking tyranny, with little to no ability for the common man to take back control. And there's countless examples of this. If we look at modern day socialism, we see it in a few places. These countries include North Korea, Venezuela, El Salvador, and Greece. Are these the fantastic utopias you want to turn the UK and the West into? Until recently, Egypt and India were communist states. However, under capitalist governments, we've seen these countries' economies explode and their rates of poverty rapidly decrease. Just a coincidence, though, I suppose. Sweden and Denmark are often cited as examples of socialist states, but operate primarily in the capitalist global market, and both have moved further and further away from socialism over the decades, until recently, in fact. These are hardly great places to live right now, anyway, more due to the explosion in sexual assault and violent crimes since that open border policy than anything to do with the economy. But speak to some Scandinavians, and you'll soon discover that all is not rosy, and many of them are in fact quite unhappy, despite it being culturally frowned upon for individuals to admit as such. Some of them claim there's genuine no-go zones. Now, I'm not making this up, and it isn't coming from a right-wing media source. All the stats are linked in the description below. The other accusation socialists make is that capitalists just don't care about the poor. They see it more appropriate to attack someone's moral values than acknowledge or debunk their actual argument, which is disappointing, but by this point I don't know why I sound surprised. The irony being, it is socialism which has had the biggest negative effect and impact on the poor over the century. As helpful as it would be to get the victims' accounts of the failures of socialism, we can't, because most of them are fucking dead. Yet it is I, the capitalist, who is apparently inherently selfish. Righto. As a capitalist, I just want people to have the opportunity to do whatever it is that they enjoy doing and be successful doing so. Apparently that means I don't care about the disadvantage, because the socialist rhetoric is that to succeed is sinful. This Marxism suggests that extracting profit from an enterprise is in itself theft, and that class is guilt. They don't love the poor, they just fucking hate the rich. This is true at least of the intellectual socialists, not that there's many of them. Some people, I'm sure, are genuinely of the opinion that a socialist economy will benefit the poor, but this is just pure ignorance, unfortunately. Yes, it sounds lovely in theory that everyone lives above the poverty line and wealth is equally distributed, but this just isn't what happens. In fact, the complete opposite, and it just devalues assets and makes everyone fucking poor. This is well documented, and the results of such widespread devaluation is riddled with catastrophe. Why do people not know this? Why in the West do we rightfully look at the right-wing fascist Nazi regime with horror and despair at the genocide of 6 million Jews, yet we totally ignore the genocide and famine caused by radical left-wing socialism and communism, which has caused at least 10 times that number of deaths? If you're against extremism, and you should be if you've got any sense of compassion or any, well, fucking sense, that has to apply to both sides. Read some history. Wise up. People have died through capitalism as well, you know. Well, of course. but very few as a direct result of genocide and famine, certainly compared to socialism and communism. Due to technology being able to rise and becoming available to the general populace thanks to capitalism, it actually saves and enhances people's lives. In a socialist economy, these technologies never even rise, never mind get utilised by the people that can actually make use of them or may need them. Why is that, you might ask, with perfect utility? Well, here's where we get to the very hub of why socialism doesn't work. Because why would people be creative and productive if there is no financial or emotional reward for doing so? Let's say, for example, you and I both work on a farm. You can harvest a whole field each day, whereas I only do a quarter of that. Guess what? We're taking home the same pay packet. You may be okay with that at first, but after a while you're going to wonder why you're working your fingers to the bone and making just as much money as someone who barely tries. So, you'll just get less productive. What happens then? We only harvested half a field a day between us rather than the two that we'd be capable of if there was genuine competition at the top. And so people waiting for food starve to death. The equal distribution of wealth leads to the destruction of a meritocracy within your economical market and in turn dilutes the value of assets. Everyone ends up poor or dead. This isn't purely hypothetical speculation. Exactly this happened in the Ukraine in the 1920s, and millions of people died due to the Soviets' attempt at socialism and Marxism, and there's plenty of bloodshed to add to the horror for the kulaks. The hard-working, productive farmers who ended up being victims of their own success when the communists arrived. You can find a link to the full story in the description, by the way. But fair warning, it's a real shit show. Now, I'm sure some of you will dismiss this as the past, and things change, as some already have when I've discussed this online in comment sections and whatnot. But you're the exact same people supporting socialist BLM because of things that happened 200 years ago, so I'm sure in which case we can agree there are lessons to be learned from events much more recent than that, right? Good. Now I get why socialism is tempting, obviously. It would be nice to have this idyllic world where everybody is looked after, nobody lives in poverty. But it has been proved time and time again that this isn't what happens. What happens is corruption sinks in. Communism was born out of that, and from that reigns tyranny and genocide at worst, and economical disaster at best. Many different people have tried their version of socialism, and if you think you could do better, you're a bloody fool. We simply don't have the psyche to make it work due to our deep-rooted evolutionary work-reward mechanisms neurologically embedded deep in our brains. The fact that it is so vulnerable to corruption and the fact that it doesn't work structurally. In fact, equality of outcome in nature is just something that we never ever see. And I think it takes a hell of a character to assume humanity, or them as an individual, could overcome an issue we see throughout nature universally. But some people think they're smarter than God and want to hand equal distribution of wealth to a large government. I mean, come on. The reason capitalism works is because it motivates people to use their talents and work hard because there are multiple tangible paths to improving your life. It's equality of opportunity. Now, that won't produce equality of outcome for a number of reasons, including people's right to make different choices, so you can't have it both ways. These are universal constants and not constricted to society or the economy or even humanity, but existence itself. The left will cite science when it suits and ignores it when it doesn't, but capitalism itself is almost a monetary mirror to evolution. It gives everyone access to the market, and whether you start at the top or the bottom, you will rise and fall dependent on your decisions and your work ethic. It creates competition in the market, and without competition, species don't evolve. The same can be said of an economy, and that spills into our society and indeed our culture. If we really want a better and fairer world, I suggest people educate, think and act for themselves and do what they can to help others where they can, rather than following an ideology that promises to look after them and vulnerable people, but will ultimately make their lives worse. If they live, that is. So, any socialists actually want to counter my argument, or shall I just leave the comments section now, assuming it's all going to be name calling by people who claim to be tolerant, but couldn't be any less tolerant of anyone with a different view to them? Prove me wrong. Go. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and have got this far, please click the subscribe button and give me a like. That really helps me out. And in the meantime, once again, stay safe, you fucking legends.